More on our top story now, and the UN's call for Myanmar's top generals to be charged with genocide. Arsalan Iftikhar is a human rights lawyer for the Burma Task Force, a US-based advocacy group working to end violence against the Rohingya in Myanmar, and joins me now on Skype. Very good to have you with us from Washington, D.C. Recommendations are one thing. Executing those recommendations are going to be much more difficult.
You're absolutely right, Sohail. I think that the first important thing to keep in mind is that the United Nations, they don't use the word genocide lightly. Genocide under international law is a term of art, and it actually triggers protections under both the Genocide Convention and other treaties, which now the UN Security Council must take forward to decide whether or not they recommend for the International Criminal Court, the ICC at The Hague, to issue genocide indictments against Myanmar's military. But this is a good first step in the right direction.
In terms of that's a sort of quick legal approach to what happens. In the immediate now, what do you expect the international community to do?
Well, again, I think the first thing, Sohail, is that it's going to go to the UN Security Council. Again, because this fact-finding mission did find that Myanmar was committing genocide, and now the Security Council is going to have to decide whether or not to refer that up to the ICC. The problem here politically, Sohail, is the fact that both China and Russia, which are both permanent members of the UN Security Council, have been tacitly supporting the Myanmar government, and they hold veto power. And so again, there's going to need to be more international mounting pressure. You're going to start to see many Security Council member countries issue sanctions against Myanmar, travel freezes, similar to what the United States and our US Treasury Department has recently done. So I think we're going to start to see the ratcheting up of pressure against Myanmar's government with this genocide finding.
You touched on the point that genocide is a very important word to use in a scenario like this. And in speaking to you before this interview, you also said that genocide makes the government in Naypyidaw compliant to stop doing what they're doing. But they've always denied genocide. They've always denied targeting the Rohingya. So how do you actually expect the government in Naypyidaw to cooperate?
That's a very good question, and I don't think that any government that has committed genocide, whether it's Nazi Germany or Rwanda or the former Yugoslavia, would ever admit to committing these acts, and that's why it's the onus of the international community. There's a doctrine under international law, Sohail, called the responsibility to protect. It's called R2P, and basically what it says, Sohail, is that every country has the responsibility to protect their own citizens, and if they do not, then the international community will step in. So again, under the R2P doctrine, the international community is now stepping in, and that's why we're seeing things being escalated both to the Security Council and then eventually, God willing, to The Hague and the ICC.
It's all very well to have these investigations and edicts coming from UN personnel. We've also seen the same scenario happen with Syria, where various UN personnel and senior politicians and international governments and capitals have said something has to happen with Syria. And as you say, in the Security Council, Russia and China have a veto. How do you expect this situation to be any different? If we're just talking about the way the veto works in the UN Security Council, how do you expect the international community to progress and an international audience watching this programme, watching in the next few weeks, thinking, you know, the UN and the international community can't really do anything?
Well, so I think that the distinction needs to be made that Syria is a little bit different than Myanmar. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad is killing all Syrians. He's killing all people. I think the analogy that we should use here with Myanmar is Rwanda or Bosnia, where certain ethnic, religious, and racial groups are being specifically targeted and disparately were being killed en masse with the intent to destroy in whole or in part an entire demographic group, which is the definition of genocide. And so I think that's important to keep in mind, is that Burma has over 100 different ethnic groups, but it is the Rohingya Muslim minority in Burma that is being disparately impacted by Myanmar's genocide right now.
For the moment, we'll leave it there, Arsalan Iftikhar. I think our audience will have been enlightened by your clarification, and thanks very much for being on the programme.
My pleasure, Sohail. Thank you.